Hello and welcome to a video on mental health in sport. I've also put and psychology, so mental health and psychology in sport. Mostly in weightlifting. I can also relate to shot put. I cannot really talk to you as much about team sports because I do not know, have not as much experience in them. So today's drawing is a light bulb because I looked at pictures of the brain to draw that and that was absolutely not going to happen. So that's a decent example of a light bulb. It's one of the screw-in ones. Apparently there's the light bulb and that's the actual, that's the glass and that's the actual bulb. So I guess it could be like seen as a eureka moment. But we are going to talk about mental health in sport and psychology and maybe some strategies on how to deal with it as best you can and deal with the ups and the downs. So, number one, it is hard. It is just tough. So it is hard, and obviously mental health issues are so prevalent in today's society, and obviously a lot of them you need medical. So I just want to point out, obviously I'm not medically trained, have a lot of experience, but I'm not medically trained in treating any mental health issues. But I'm talking really about serious mental illness. I'm not really talking about just feeling low or sad. I'm talking about actual diagnosed a clinical diagnosis. It is just tough. It does just make everything harder by a long way. I think if you had two people who were exactly the same in everything, one had serious mental illness and one didn't, the person with the mental illness would have a much harder time in dealing with and training with. I do think that they would potentially gain a lot of stuff and benefits from it, which I'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, bottom line is it's just hard. Anyone who has a serious mental illness and continues to push on and train as hard as they can and try and be the best person they can is very, very, very strong. And you have to understand that. And a lot of people do get broken down by mental illness. And that's okay, obviously we're not really here to judge, but understand that it is unbelievably hard to deal with. So, but number two, I've got benefits of sport. So we all know, we've all been there, where our sport has helped us not necessarily get over, but deal with certain emotions that we have, and even maybe dealing with expressing said emotions. A lot of us aren't very good at expressing our emotions. But being in a sport, especially an individual sport where you can really express yourself in your own personality, in the way you lift or the way you throw or the way you train, really helps us not only develop confidence, and which is something that is really useful for people with mental illness. They will be obviously stigmatized, and their confidence might drop from that, just speaking from experience. But sport itself, having a set goal, to training for sport, you will have a set goal. You will probably keep to a routine. If it's going to the track every couple of days, going to the gym X amount of days at certain times, those things are the benefits of sport that will help not only you to deal with and live with a mental illness diagnosis, but they'll also help, I don't want to say prevent, but they might buffer against some of the negative effects of mental illness, and you might find yourself possibly less likely to get into a kind of vicious cycle of, for example, depression kicks in, then your depression, laziness kicks in, which isn't laziness, by the way, but that's how it presents. And then you don't do anything, and you don't do any training, and then you get health issues, and then you get depressed because of that, and it's a cycle. Whereas this passion for sport will kind of nip that in the bud and will, at least for the physical ailments, you'll be more protected, and then as a result, you might be more protected from some of the more mental ailments and some of the more mental issues of mental health issues. I do want to talk about benefits of mental illness in high performance sport. Anyone who competes at high level has a set characteristic, especially in individual sports, has a set characteristic of their personality. Now, absolutely no, I'm not saying that everyone who competes is mentally ill. I mean, they probably are in terms of some diagnosis, but you can fit any diagnosis for any personality behavior. But there are certain benefits and to being mentally ill. Now, if you ask anyone who is with a serious mental health condition, none of them will say, I love it 100% of the time. You know, I'm so proud of it 100% of the time. There'll be times when they are. There'll be a lot of times when they're not. I think, so personally for me, if it's been horrendous and it's been probably the worst thing consistently throughout my life, ruined my childhood in many ways, and it really, it did ruin my childhood in many ways, and I was quite lucky with my childhood as well. I was, and it ruined university for me, in my opinion. I did not get the same experience as a lot of people. My life experience is not the same because of that, and it has been the hardest thing, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But there has been some benefit. Now, saying that, if I was to be born again, I would probably say I wish I didn't have this, and it makes me a little bit upset to say that. But makes me a little bit upset to say that. But some of the benefits of, for example, so I obviously, those who know me know about my mental health diagnosis, and I'm not going to talk about all mental health diagnoses. There's millions and billions probably, and there's many different ones. Now, if you've got something like depression, I can't see the direct correlation between that helping you in a sport, because just solely depression, by the way, it has benefits in terms of you might become you might have more empathy. You obviously have more experience of that. Your emotional range might be a little bit wider than someone who's a little bit more, who's never really had to deal with that kind of thing. And that's the same for all mental health illnesses. But I will encourage people who do have a diagnosis, or maybe they've just recently been diagnosed, or they've had it since they were a kid. And this could be anything. It could be autism, it could be attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, it could be ADHD, it could be obsessive compulsive disorder like me, it could be anxiety or depression, the more kind of common ones, common but not less serious, the more common ones but not less serious. And then it could be something as extreme as psychosis like me, like psychosis, or schizophrenia, or just one of the more maybe the more rare, the kind of less common ones. So I would encourage those people not to necessarily think, right, I've got OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, therefore I'm going to act like this. Now, obviously, you don't want to do that. They also don't want to say, oh, I've got OCD, and now I'm going to use it to my advantage. That comes over time. It's not really an instantaneous thing. You can just get that ability. But I think I recognize where it has helped me, and I'll get to that in a minute. And I recognize that there are times when I can harness it. It's probably the best way I can harness it to my advantage. And maybe I'll get to that in a minute. Not all mental health illnesses will benefit your sport. That's absolutely understandable. But some can. Now, we know that sport helps mental illness a lot. The disorder I'm going to talk about is obsessive compulsive disorder, so that's the one I have the most experience in. Obviously, that's what I have. I have given talks about it a couple times. The benefits for me are, I am very, newsflash, obsessive about training, and because of my propensity for routines and structure, that's helped me a lot, and I think that's helped me way more than someone who doesn't have that could ever dream of trying to just do on their own. I think I don't have to try at all to keep a routine. I don't have to try at all to be obsessive about training. Like, there's no, even on my like worst days, it's just become part of my routine that it's kind of like it's scary not to do it. So for me, being that kind of level of obsessive, I think has shaped me, and it has been a huge benefit. Not necessarily short-term circumstances sometimes, when I will, repeat training sessions 2 or 3 times, or like heavy sessions, or I'll be in the gym for hours and hours and hours. Like, obviously at the time it kind of ruins the week of training. It, well, not ruins, but it pushes it back a little bit. But over time it's taught me about, and these are some of the things that all mental health issues will teach you, is that, things like resiliency, being resilient and being persistent as well. Basically just being a bit hard, like not being, like, you can't really be weak and survive with these mental health issues. You can't be weak. You can be weak, but you probably won't survive. And I use that term loosely, but it is obviously a serious, it is as explicit as I said. You might not survive. I don't want to say that everyone, obviously that's absolutely not true. Not everyone with mental health illnesses will die from said illnesses, but some people do. But you can't be weak, so you have to. So then anything, like for me, like no session is ever scary, or no session is kind of like, oh man, I might not be able to do that, because I've done a lot worse. I've got through a lot worse in my life. And it's made me a little bit more aware of, if I'm having a really, really hard session, in the sense of it doesn't actually feel good, like not it's heavy, or it's always heavy, that's weightlifting, it is the lifting of heavy weights. But if I'm getting through a session and it feels like this it actually isn't right, it's given me a little bit more clarity to see and to identify that today I might actually be pushing towards an injury, or I might be pushing towards kind of burnout. Whereas I think in the past, kind of before I've had much experience with these issues, I would just put it down to, it's a bad day, I just need to kind of just have to grind through. But because I've got through so much worse, I don't feel like I need to do that all the time necessarily. It's one extreme or the other. It's either that, or on the flip side, I just will do every session 100% as it is, and I won't change it at all. If I get past that point of kind of no return, I will switch up the session slightly, then I will, but then it will play on my mind so much that I will do way extra. So I think a healthy way of, maybe most people who don't have these issues will say, for example, they've got 4 sets of 5, back squat at 180. It does not feel good, so they go, I'm just going to do the set to 5 at 160. Fair enough. A better person might just do that and say, cracking, let's move on. I would still, now that I've got the experience, what I'm trying to say, I would still do that, the 4x5 at 160. But it would play on my mind so much that I would push extra hard on all the other things, accessories, mobility work, gymnastics, sprints, diet, nutrition. And I think over time, that has actually helped me a little bit, now that I've learned how to do it. Right, I think in the past, I would have just been like 4x5 at 180, possibly get injured. And obviously that doesn't help me. Once you learn how to harness it, you can become even more powerful. Now, I've worked with a couple of people with, for example, who have autism or autism spectrum disorders. That's, in many ways, it's like a superpower. In many ways. Now, it's hard. It's probably one of the hardest things to live with. I'm trying to go through the diagnosis process at the moment. So I know a little bit about it. It's kind of like a superpower, similar to obsessive compulsive disorder. No one is going to be, you cannot fake mental illness for that long. You can fake it, but you can't fake it persistently. You will just mentally give up and you'll resort back to habits and put in your actual personality. No, you cannot fake being obsessively committed or obsessively driven, obsessively obsessive about a sport. And I think over time that has helped me a lot. Just get more good volume in and train more at that. But I realise this video has gone on a little bit, so we'll just crack on a little bit. Finally, so that's just me talking about the benefits of mental illness for sport. I should say for sport. It's not like having a mental health illness is easy. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying, oh yeah, we've all got a mental health, issue. Let's have a party. Like, accept it. Don't overdo it. In my opinion, don't overdo the acceptance because then you become slave to it. That's another point. Say for example, I walk in tomorrow to the doctors, get a diagnosis of. Let's say I get the diagnosis of autism. I'm gonna be like, because I've had experience of this in the past, of my other diagnoses. If that were to happen for me, I go into the doctor tomorrow. They give me the diagnosis. They say, right, you have autism. Maybe it's Asperger's or whatnot. I'll be like, okay. I mean, good, cool. I'm glad that I know now that I can actually treat it or manage it. I could have a target kind of management plan. I will be a little bit like, wow, that's quite big news. But I won't have a party, and I won't be like, oh yeah, I have autism. I now act like this, or I now change my behavior to fit that mold, or I now XYZ. It's not, because that becomes, it kind of identifies as you. Now, I don't like to overly praise or overly congratulate myself on anything. If I hit a PB, for example, I don't want to, I'll post it on Instagram, but I post most of my training on Instagram just mainly because it gets me clients. To be honest, I don't care about other people seeing it other than my mum. That's mainly the reason why I started it, by the way, because she obviously doesn't see me. I don't want to be, I'm not the kind of person who is just going to be like consistently, oh, look at me, give me praise. I don't care about that. I never have. I don't really rate people who are like that. And it's the same with this. People will use their mental health condition as not only an excuse, but also an excuse for their shitty behavior, basically. And we don't want to get into that. So there are some benefits, mental health illness, if you can harness it. It's not immediate. You have to learn how to harness it, and it's not a quick process. It takes a long time. It took me, how old am I now? 24. Over a decade to get to the point I am now. And I think maybe if, say 100%, me at 0% was when I first diagnosed, 100% for me would be like enlightenment. 20% maybe I'm on 20%. It's been over a decade. Maybe I'm on 20%. So it's been over 10 years. And I'm still learning some of the more intricate benefits for me. So my biggest benefits to this have been academic purely, not in sport, but I can see the benefits of it. I'm done. Finally, I'm done. Number 4, psychology. Not mental health issues, psychology. So in sport, it pays to be better psychologically. You don't choke as often in terms of your performance stays high, even in high pressure situations. Some strategies we can use for this are pre-performance routines. Definitely. So having a set pre-performance routine that's meaningful to you, that is, that focuses you. Now, whether that means it relaxes you or whether that means it hypes you up is purely individual to you. So for me, my pre-performance routine for weightlifting has to relax me because I lift better when I'm relaxed, within reason. I don't like to get overly hyped. I don't need to get overly hyped. My hype comes from the nervousness of the PB lift, for example. If I'm going for 141 on the snatch, which would be a PB, the bar being loaded is my hype. I will be, they call it in psychology, aroused. Psychologically, I'll be aroused, which means heart rate goes up, concentration, you get a bit wired, your muscle contractions get a little bit quicker, and yes, I am aroused for the barbell. Someone's gonna take that, probably Luke Stephen is gonna take that little clip and put it somewhere, but you get physiologically and psychologically aroused or elevated for the barbell. That's all I need. So for me, my pre-performance ritual, my pre-performance routine is consistent. It's something you have to actually practice. You can't just do it on the PB lift. You have to put it into practice. Can't be too long, but can't be too short. It has to be perfect, and you have to practice it. You have to try other things. You have to, the first time you do it. So I don't know if this is the right place to say this, but my original pre-performance routines involved religion. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this for my own reasons. Involved religion, and in a positive way. They involve religion before a lift or before a race. So that's how far I went back, plus 6 years. And over time, when I lost my what's the best way to say this? When I lost my faith because of events, I went away from that. So people who knew me back really early, and that's of my lifting, and who still know me now, of which I could think of one person, his name being Andrew, of only one person, Andrew, would remember the days pre-lift of what my pre-lift routine was. And he probably will remember it because we talked about it a couple of times, because we had a joke about what he used to do. So my ritual used to be that. And then I lost my faith, and then that wouldn't work moving forward. Now, I'm not against trying to get my faith back. I have tried multiple times, but things have frequently stopped me. It's always the same thing. I mean, that's a story for another video. But I've had to practice and update and tinker with the specific routine. The routine for me now is a couple of words, which I'm not sharing. A couple of strategies I use to not be overly aroused, relax my heart rate a little bit, and focus more than anything. Now, at certain levels, cues have to come into play. So you have to think, for me, I might be thinking, if I'm doing shot put, for example, might be thinking, okay, I just need to finish long with the arm. I need to keep the hips a little bit lower. I need to keep the upper body lower. Elbow up kind of thing, elbow out. And you have to put one or two of those in there, of course, but over time they'll cease to be as significant as your technique gets more grooved. So that's one strategy, having a pre-performance routine. Second strategy is things like visualization is unbelievably powerful and purposeful practice. So actually practicing when you train with some real intent and purpose. Now, the purpose doesn't mean try harder. It means try smarter, really, and try and visualize as much as what you can. Visualization and purposeful practice go hand in hand, really. It can even be, it's just as simple as before you lift every single time, and it will become part of your pre-lift routine for a while, is just very quickly imagine the lift going on perfectly. Imagine what would happen if you lifted the bar perfectly every time. You only have to run through it once in your head. Stay up to the bar, grip the bar, hook grip, get my back tight, push with the legs, extend, catch. That's it. Takes 5 seconds. and you can feel the muscles working. You can even, that's why sometimes when you see, usually more in track and field, but you'll see maybe people on the long jump runway or something, and they'll be counting strides in their head. They'll be going, see what I mean? They'll be doing this kind of thing. They'll be going 1, 2, 3. They'll be going right foot down. And it's all the stuff that I used to do as well when I was competing. It's quite hard to do that in weightlifting. But you see some people, they'll stand there before they lift and they'll think about shrugging up. And that's some kind of strategy for them that gets them focused and helps them psychologically. This will help you more, not necessarily as much in training, although it will actually help you more in the bigger competitions when that pressure's there and the crowd's there, and maybe you forget about your actual performance and you get too caught up in the crowd, or you get too caught up in being nervous, for example. So that's one good thing. So this video is probably maybe a bit too long. This covered quite a lot actually, and it's my normal strategy of write a couple of notes down and then just talk. Maybe I went over a couple of things that maybe need more detail. Actually, let me know if you want that, because I'm more than happy to do that. I've got a good week coming up where I can do that. If you want to hear more about my personal story, let me know. But yeah, I hope that was helpful. And look, have a cracking evening, guys. It's Sunday evening. I'm about to cook up some pasta. Got my ingredients there. And I'm going to have an absolutely fantastic evening by myself. My hair's getting a bit long. I forgot to shave it today. Next stop, dreadlocks. I need to get that rid of. It's messy as hell. Have a cracking evening. Any questions, as always, let me know. And enjoy.